So it's time now for our decentralised and software-based production panel. So if I could ask the panellists to come up and join me on stage, please. So with the rise of cloud, IP and remote technologies, traditional hardware-heavy workflows are giving way to more agile and cost-effective approaches. So we're now going to hear from this panel practical insights into the implementation of these tools, the benefits and challenges for production teams, and the broader impact on live sports coverage. So exploring how these technologies are reshaping the way content is created and delivered. So at the end there, already stood and poised, ready to go through a couple of slides to get us started. We have Ed Barton. Ed's Research Director at Caretta Research. And just next to Ed is Colin Coyle from Haivision, SVP of Sales. In the middle there is Jens Envall. Jens is CTO at DMC. And next to Jens is Adam Marshall. And Adam is Grass Valley Chief Product Officer. And then next to me is Donald Sievewright, Matrox EMEA Director of Sales. Right, Ed, you're going to get us started. So over to you.
Thank you very much, George. So I'm a research director at Caretta Research. We do a lot of work in technology verticals, of which media technology is probably our largest and our dearest, given the experience of the team. We work a lot with vendors around some of their challenges with selling their stuff more effectively and positioning themselves as best they can. And we do a lot of work on the buyer side with broadcasters, pay TV operators and streaming platforms, particularly around technology, strategy, and how they conduct their procurements. So I wanted to share with you some research that we conducted very recently around the transition from dedicated boxes, the kinds of boxes that you see in a live production environment, in a studio, in a control room, in an OB van. And there's a sense that we might be able to do this in a slightly more interesting, a slightly more efficient way. Instead of getting the capabilities you need from a dedicated box with embedded software and a perpetual license, that we use readily available commoditized hardware, or COTS if we want to use the acronym, and we deploy software onto it dynamically as we need it. And there's a number of ways in which you can acquire these on a pay-as-you-go basis as opposed to a perpetual license. So some people feel that the transition from dedicated boxes to dynamic software is as inevitable as, say, the shift from DVD to streaming. But it's perhaps been going a little bit slower and not as smoothly as some people expected. So we decided to look into that in a little bit more detail. We went out and we spoke with a number of CTOs and technical production managers from a variety of predominantly European and North American broadcasters, all kinds of use cases across commercial and PSB to sports-focused to news-focused. And we reckon that flexible license software is indeed a growing segment of the media technology market. However, perpetual license software is still triple the volume of spending that we're seeing on an annualized basis. So at Caretta Research, we often say we'll tell you what we think for free. What the real gold is what technology buyers tell us in one-to-one, in-depth conversations. You can ignore what a consultant says to you. It's harder to ignore the people who are writing the checks for what you're trying to sell. And that is what we try to distill into usable and actionable insight for the people that we work with. So we ask them, when you're thinking about, should we buy a dedicated box if we need a new color corrector, vision mixer, video converter, whole panoply of interesting capabilities within these facilities, then we noticed a couple of things when we tested the dynamic software proposition on them. CapEx or OpEx, there is a preference for CapEx. This is the way we've always done it. Buy once, it's yours forever. Finance teams love it. Amortize it to zero over 5 to 7 years. Then that box is off your balance sheet. Finance director says to everyone, sweat that thing for as long as you can. It looks great in our spreadsheets. TCO, whether you're doing CapEx or OpEx, TCO is still a very, very important factor in the purchasing decision. And frankly, some of the feedback we got was that the vendor propositions around their pay-as-you-go software products is still a little bit on the expensive side. Vendors at this point will scream at us, you're not comparing like with like. We bring so many more things to the party with dynamic software. We do the maintenance, we do the critical updates, including the security. We deliver a whole set of new capabilities every year which enable new workflows. It's getting better and better over time. Dedicated box just sits there, and it's going to be what it was like 7 years ago. They love to save money. How much they previously spent is their North Star for how much they want to spend in the future. So if they think that, or if the perception is that moving to a dynamic software environment is going to cost them more, it's not going to happen. Predictability, they want to be able to look forward and have a really solid idea of how much their infrastructure is going to cost them, particularly in instances where they may have to burst to a particular cyber peak when their requirements suddenly increase. Sports tournament or general election were two examples cited to us. And of course, everyone likes simplicity. You know, how easy is a supplier to work with? How easy is their software, tokens, credits, floating licenses to work with? And I'm running out of time, and I said I wouldn't do this. What they don't want is pretty simple, the opposite of what we were just talking about, but managing floating software credits and tokens is a complicated thing, which they don't necessarily have the internal expertise to do. Some parallels to how broadcasters and production companies had to adapt to doing more on cloud computing platforms. I'm not going to go into detail on the rest because these guys will tell us in a lot more granular detail. I'm really interested to hear their feedback. We think this is a very significant transition. We're very impressed by how some vendors are collaborating with initiatives from the EBU around the media exchange layer, the dynamic media facility. At least 2 of the vendors who are involved in that initiative are here now, and I apologize for going over time, but I think it'll be really great to hear in a little more detail about what I've been talking about, and if it's how they see it from their perspective as well. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ed. Thank you. Come and take a seat. So, Jens, we will start with you if we can. DMC obviously doing an awful lot of work in this area, a lot of sort of transitioning to software-based production. So can you just give us a very quick sense for anyone here who might be less familiar with what you guys have been doing, just exactly what that kind of journey has involved, and also give us an idea of what some of the biggest challenges in moving away from that traditional kind of hardware-heavy approach have been?
We have been working closely with Grass Valley about building a TV station for Ziggo Sport here in the Netherlands. We have a benefit of that one as a start point in it because we don't have any legacy to start with. So we started everything from a, so to say, white paper in it. Important is trying to describe actually the workflow and these kind of things instead of making a transition from hardware box A to hardware box B. More looking into the workflow kind of things and how to set them and be able to do things in it, yeah. And that has also been one of the challenges because you also need to calculate the compute needed for it and also how much flexibility and these kind of things around it, yeah.
And Adam, Jens mentioned obviously working closely with Grass Valley. Just can you tell us a little bit about what some of those challenges that they may have been coming to you to help solve and to help fix? What have been the real kind of issues and problems in helping with this transition?
Well, I think the primary use case that DMC brought to us and the end client effectively was how can they do more with less, which I hate to use because everyone says the same term, but ultimately to Ed's point, how can you bring more simplicity, more efficiency, more agility to the production and effectively react much quicker? And actually, if I don't mind me saying, when we started this project, what we started jointly saying was requirements, then turned into something very different as time went on because the end client ultimately has demands, they have interests, they have new requirements every single day. The beauty of the system we put together on that one, which is a full end-to-end software defined solution with third parties, the answers, was able to react to that. So when customers, or when Ziggo Sport in this case, wanted to add another service, it was a simple deployment tool, which now you guys are self-delivering. We're not involved in it at all, which is fantastic to see. I think the pain point piece you touched on a little bit is around size and compute. One of the challenges that often from a mentality perspective is traditional systems, that box did one thing. And yes, absolutely, Ed, yes, you put that box in a rack and it does that thing and it lasts for 7 years or so. I will say, yes, but then it doesn't get updates and all those kind of things, absolutely. But part of that is if you're trying, the whole software-defined structure works best for return on investment if you rethink the approach. You can't go into it thinking this box does that one task. You've got to be looking at it, I'm doing software so I can run more services on that box, so I've got no additional kind of space, and I'm using every inch of power in that compute I can to ensure that you can go from countless racks of discrete hardware, in your case just 20 servers for an entire end-to-end production system. That's the power of it, but you've got to have a new revolutionary approach to it and think, how can I do this in the most efficient way, as opposed to doing it the way I've done for the last 20 years or so.
Donald, we'll come to you if we can. For all of those shifts that we've heard Ed kind of characterise, and then Jens and Adam, what are the measurable improvements that clients are able to see? And is that, in terms of, sort of cost, speed, sustainability? Where are the kind of real gains to be made?
I mean, I'll leave cost to the side because we're a primary technology vendor, so cost really is determined by further up the food chain from where Matrox operates in this case. But one of the things that going to a software-orientated production system offers you is remarkable scalability and flexibility. So, if you've got a standard production system, you have a capacity limit there, be that your router or your servers or various other components that are in there. Once you go to a software approach, you no longer have those. And if you architect your software system correctly, that becomes almost infinite. If you have an on-prem system, you of course have the compute you have locally, which is perfectly valid, but of course you can always burst into the cloud as well, and then you've got an almost infinite supply of components to use there. So you have the possibility of scaling your production, and that's both from a utility perspective, what you're using, both up and down, so you can go to very large productions from small productions and scale large productions right back down to very small productions. And that means that you're going to be using less cost per total production because you use them very efficiently. You'll reduce the electricity you're using because there'll be systems you simply aren't using, and you'll be utilizing the right sort of system for your requirements. And it's quite important to do that dynamically because in many environments you have to go a bit long, something happens and something else comes on, and being able to scale dynamically is very, very important for these environments.
And Colin, can you talk to us a little bit about the total cost of ownership as well? So sure. We're talking about, yeah, you're on.
I am.
Just give us Haivision's sort of perspective on that, if you can.
Sure. So, as someone who is primarily in the business of a box that does what it's supposed to do for 5 to 7 years, total cost of ownership is very big for us, right? When we look at comparing our approach to market versus pure software players, right? What we're looking at is you're going to have a stable investment on the side, the encode, the decode, the transmission, right? But as the inventor of SRT, we look at the whole chain of where that video is going from where it lives. And the thing that's exciting about where we are today with decentralized production is with the movement to REMI, we decoupled production from necessarily the site of the sporting event itself. And now with decentralized, we're decoupling production from that host network, right? And allowing you to produce each individual piece of a larger production with the right technology. So you can use a low-cost phone-based camera to capture fan coverage and events from all the way around the world, while you're also using, $250,000 worth of Grass Valley inside the venue for those big high-motion shots, right? So decoupling the production tools from the production center, you're changing where and how you invest to lower your total cost of production.
So, Adam, Colin has sort of expanded on a point that you made around, not doing things in the same way. So that kind of decoupling, allowing you to approach things in a different way. Can you just talk us through, and it'd be interesting to hear your points on this as well, Jens, around the kind of culture that's involved. So the kind of mindset shift, of how teams might have to have changed the way they think, perhaps to kind of succeed in more of a sort of self-service environment.
Yeah, I think that these systems are only as powerful as the team's ability to use them, that simplicity piece. So it's really important to make sure it's incredibly easy to do a multi-vendor deployment on a solution, which is kind of what we've got with the AMP system with DMC amongst the GB Media universe. The elements in terms of, from an engineering point of view, there is definitely a trend towards decentralized operation, as you're saying, where it's not just remoing where you move all the signals into a central facility, which of course we've been doing for many years over JPEG Access or SRT or whatever it may be. It's actually about truly decentralizing and leaving some of the processing at the edge. So rather than send out a big OB truck, or even if you do, also put some COTS compute in there to do additional processing there on demand, and then only bring back what you need to. But then spread your production over multiple environments. Actually, DMC is a unique piece for us because not only is it the world's first end-to-end software-defined because it's a greenfield, it's also a little bit unique that it's all on-prem and no hybrid. And that was a purposeful decision based on the 24/7 nature. But most of our customers are entirely hybrid. In fact, they're multi-site and cloud at the same time because they've got that ecosystem over the top of it. So from an engineering point of view, your engineers can't be in every one of those locations. And the point is, that is the point. Your engineers can be at home, they can be called out at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they just log onto their laptop and support it. Or if you do an OB truck, they don't need to go to site, they can do it remotely. For the operators, it's probably more of a cultural piece, but that's not really a software-defined thing, that's more of a culture of the truck. So all of those operators in a single truck have a very close-knit kind of ecosystem. They then move remote, okay, they're not in a closed confined environment anymore, what does that mean? And now they're in total different locations around the world, probably on different continents, what does that mean for communication? And I think that's probably the more challenging piece.
Just to hop on the culture for a half a second, I was in New York last week and speaking with a large production company there, and he said one of the biggest changes has been pets. These guys who used to fly around the world, they always wanted a dog, they always wanted a cat, right? And they could never have it. But now, with all of the decentralized technologies we're using, there are these guys that don't have to go live in vans for 7-8 months out of the year, and they can have a dog. And that's a pretty amazing change in quality of life.
I think, Ed,
That's the key takeaway.
you've got a new point to add to your slide now, Ed. Increase in dogs.
Yeah, put it on the slide. We need dogs.
Jens, to give us your view, because obviously you mentioned greenfield sites, being able to kind of start from scratch. What has that meant for the kind of hiring and making sure you've got the right skills and the right people as operators?
Yeah, so when we started up the business here close to 2 years ago from zero employment, we have focused a lot of employing the younger generation of people because we see that's a perfect match of adopting and learning the new technology, which normally took a couple of days, like learning someone to a vision mixer or something. We see that we can learn and teach somebody within an hour, and they can take the things to the next level. So in the Nordics, we're focusing a lot of doing efficiency in production, using the software in it. So where we can see that one operator can handle vision mixing, audio mixing, graphic, implemented in one user interface, for example. That gives a great flexibility. And also what we've seen as well, we don't have any borders in it. So a production taking place in Germany can be operated from Sweden or from Norway, where before we have been very, very dedicated that we need to be in the same region or the same country with that. Yeah.
And tell us about the impact on what you are able to enable from a production perspective. So you mentioned about working with Zego, for example. What does this mean for the viewers and for what we're able to see on screen at home?
Yeah, I think one thing, it's not only on screen, so to say, if you're talking about the traditional television with a playout and so on, but it's more than you have the possibility to get publicity in other medias as well. We see it's a growing request by social media to having instant things that's happening being published. I think we all see that the decrease of hours of linear TV and more ending up in alternative media. And it's so much easier to do that with a software solution than a traditional hardware. And also when we know that we will work a lot of years with a client, so to say, we know for sure that things will change over time.
Yeah. Okay, and Ed, starting with you, if we can, I want to just take a moment to kind of look ahead. So if we sort of look 5 years into the future, what trends or innovations in decentralized software-driven production do you think are really going to kind of redefine the industry?
I would hark back to a couple of threads which have already been picked up in previous discussions here. The CEO of Sunset and Vine correctly identified the grievous economic pressures on broadcasters, and if broadcasters need to spend less money, then they're going to look towards the tech stack first, and they want to preserve their spending power on content, talent, and sports rights. So, to take us to another strand, we talked a little bit, both on this panel and previous ones, about how a software-based environment does enable you to yield greater efficiencies and utilization in your infrastructure. So, we think that that might be one area where broadcasters look to make their balance sheets, to make their spending slightly better than it was before. So, but the thing is, when we spoke to a number of broadcasters, one of the things we asked them was, to what extent are you monitoring the utilization of your infrastructure? And people do, to a kind of a general level, is that studio being used, but not to a particularly granular level, like how much of these boxes, how much of these software licenses, how much of the electricity, the ducting, the cooling, the actual real estate of the broadcast studio itself being used. They don't go down to that level, so they don't actually realize how much more they could be saving or what kind of efficiencies they could be generating. So we'd expect to see a little more movement on the infrastructure front as well. Also in a software-based environment, if you really want that flexibility, the agility to morph your production facilities from one use case, say from a morning show to a quiz show or something like that relatively quickly, you're going to need a pretty good orchestration and configuration layer. We don't think they're quite there yet, so we expect to see some movement on that as well.
And same question to you as well, Colin. Next 5 years is.
So Joe was talking about the IBC Accelerator program right before we came up, and that project for private 5G coming off of an aircraft, Haivision and Neutral Wireless are working as a big part of that team on that project. So when we're able to do that, and you can put a network on top of a mountain, right? You're not going to pick up an Obi van and, chinook it up to the top of the mountain as well. So by nature, again, you're decoupling. The network is where you need it to be, but there's no latency advantage to having the production at the mountain with that sporting event, right? So we see the changing of these networks, the push toward commercial satellite, right? Things like what we're seeing from Project Kuiper. They're really going to enable you to move productions in ways that you haven't before, tell stories in ways that you haven't before, and that's what we're going to need to see the software industry become a bigger player in how we move those parts together and stitch into a quality production.
Fantastic. So Jens, as Colin was saying, more powerful networks over the next few years to kind of enable more of this production. For DMC, what's going to change over the next few years? How are you going to evolve how you're supporting your clients?
No, but I see that we are focusing a lot. We are doing a lot of multi-camera production. So we see that using that technology, using the 5G system and these kind of things, that gives us a much more greater possibilities of doing productions. We see also that one with the software, combining software with AI, for example. We are already doing AI audio mixing. We're doing camera work with AI. I think what we can see that come next is maybe graphics integrated with AI and these kind of things. So I think the things that's been limited by connectivity before, that's not a problem anymore for the future. I think that will go rapidly fast, that development, yeah.
And Adam, what's from Grass Valley's perspective, what's the top trend, would you say, that's going to shape software-based production? You can give us two, yeah. Go on.
So the root cause of all of this is broadcasters and media organizations need to produce more content at the lowest possible cost. That's what it all comes down to. There's not enough funding in the industry, largely, or diminishing. How can you monetize that content better? You generate more unique, compelling content to stand out from everybody else in the field. So that's really driving a massive increase in the view or the desire to have software defined, I think, because it allows that flexibility to try something out. If it doesn't work, you stop it and you flip to something else. Some platforms do exist that can do the orchestration, Ed, but we'll come on to that. The thing that's been a barrier there, I think, has also then been the ability to do that processing at scale. Hardware will be around for many, many years to come. We're investing heavily in FPGA because of that need. However, COTS is catching up. So I think that, and by COTS, I also mean the hyperscale, because that's COTS behind the scenes anyway. So the GPU capacity, the CPU capacity is exponentially increasing in scale. Some say Moore's law is kind of disappearing, but I think it's moving to GPU instead. And the density we can process in a single block is becoming higher and higher, which then drives that efficiency through. And it drives the move for the bigger networks, because I can process more in one box, but how do I get the signals into that box? So bringing 400 gig networks into all of the environments is pretty much becoming the norm now. Where does it go next as the performance continues to improve?
Fantastic. Donald, you get to have the last word. So give us that perspective. Next 5 years, what's
next 5 years, what I think is certain to happen is far more if you're going to be in production in majority or complete software-based solutions. That's absolutely inevitable. There's no way out of that. Traditional workflows will stick around as those assets are sweated, but there's nothing that you guys are doing apart from the edge stuff, the cameras and things like that, that you can't do in a pure software-based solution. And once you have that, you're going to have far more flexibility. You're going to be able to try things really quickly just by scaling up a little bit and find out really quickly if it doesn't work and scale back and cut that cost very quickly as well. So you get the chance to experiment very quickly. And just incidentally, there was a component in one of the last presentations about how there's a top tier and then there are people below them doing, more informal broadcast type operations. Software-based solutions mean those guys, when they become quite good at what they're doing, will be able to access the same software-based solutions as all the rest of you. So if you're a production company and you're not employing these guys or you're not understanding how they're going about their things, you need to understand that, because a software-based solution is much easier to access than a $2 million OB van. And they'll have access to that sort of technology as well, and it will start to compete with you.
Fantastic stuff. Gentlemen, we've run out of time. So listen, thank you very much for sharing all of those insights with us. And yeah, look forward to catching up with you all over the show. Join me in thanking the panel. Thank you very much.